Sure. All right, well, while that gets pulled up, Levant Coney is definitely a key member of this group, and this problem has been something that's been on her mind for a while, and that is how do we accommodate visitors, and in the literal sense, how do we accommodate visitors to stay on campus? And the simple truth is we don't have a dedicated space for that. We have a lot of, or we have several residential people here that year in and year out offer up their space, an extra bedroom. But the more I listened to my colleagues and the more I thought about it, it's kind of a tall order to put on a potentially visiting family. I would certainly feel like I was imposing on somebody to come stay in their home, and maybe even feel a little bit uncomfortable if I wasn't familiar with Fessenden or that family. That's a tall ask for both parties. So that's the problem that we came up with. Early on, as we sat in the library, you all probably heard mention of a tiny house as a solution. I just want to say before I pass it along to my colleagues that for me in this process, it was really important that, yeah, we knew that the tiny house was an option, but then we spent a considerable amount of time exploring other options, thinking about pre-existing spaces. Ultimately, we came back to a tiny house, but there was an iterative process to get there. I think Mike, when we talked to him initially, said that it's always easier to work with an existing structure, right? And so that got us sort of looking at existing structures. But it started to dawn on me, certainly, that one, that's not very fun, right? I mean, just to take like an old garage and sort of make it fancy, that's not nearly as fun. And two, I don't think I mean, in all seriousness, there's not sort of the excitement when we start to think about pitching this to potential donors and things. It's a lot easier, I think, to sell something like a micro home than it is just to slap some paint on something and maybe add some insulation. So that was a really important sort of step and moment for me to sort of identify that tiny home, step away from it for a while, and then we ended up back there. So I'll pass it off.
So I don't think we're going to read through this. It's probably best to go to the next slide and talk about, we looked at different locations on campus where we could put a tiny home. Kind of piggybacking on what Max said, tiny homes, we've all seen the HGTV shows and kind of what sacrifices they make to be in a tiny home. And we had some different limitations here or opportunities. So we didn't need the kitchen, because we feel we're going to use the food services that Fessenden has to offer. So the layout's a little bit different. We wanted this to have a certain refinement, a certain comfort, so that guests would really feel, would really want to use this space. So we found some modular homes that were lower in cost and also had that flexible space in the interior, and were really easy to construct. And also, to the educational component of this, how can we get students involved both in the design and possibly in the construction? I think it's a great opportunity that we don't want to overlook if this was to come to fruition, was how to get students really involved. Maura Chapman in algebra this year did a PBL on tiny home living, which was more about homes on wheels. We had certainly looked at this project as maybe something on wheels, but in the end came to something that's more permanent. And so we looked for our site. And so if you can see where the site is, right next to the Scandinavian Field, by the exit back to Waltham Street. If you go to the next slide, we can zoom in a little bit more. And that is the footprint for our model. So it does seem to fit there. It's close to the slope. It's not the only location on campus. There's another one, which I guess is the old fuel storage site for the boiler. So kind of near the hockey rink. That there's some space, some other space, but this seemed like it would be really integrated into campus and convenient, and you know, I think if it's sited looking over the Scandinavian field, it feels like you have a big yard out in front too. And I definitely wanted to have, I think we all wanted it to have a nice deck. So this is one unit. We thought that if we're going to go through the effort to build this, let's do two and do it side by side. When we think of all the constituents that might be using this, I think there is enough demand out there for this kind of space. We talk about residential faculty, and maybe they have in-laws or parents or relatives or friends or guests that come, and kind of like the saying of you know, fences make for good neighbors. I think space makes for good guests when you have some privacy and some space to get away. That if you have relatives coming to campus, or you have guest speakers, or also our teachers that come to visit from India, you know, that's a lot to ask of residential faculty to put those visiting faculty up in their home for an extended period of time. So that's kind of some of the usage. I think we're looking at some of the, this is one design for this modular home that really is the basis for this, but I think we would really open it up to an algebra class, maybe, geometry class, giving certain parameters of the space and seeing what they come up with.
We probably should have mentioned this at the very beginning, but as far as like the sort of primary intended use or people,
we were really thinking about parents of students on financial aid, right? And you know, I think talking to Mike again, we all sort of seem to be in agreement that as a school and sort of looking in comparison to the rest of the field, we can do more, right? And we're a weird school. We're a bit of an anomaly in that we're not boarding, but we are boarding, but we're day, but we're pre-K to 9. You know, we're all these sort of different things. So it's hard to really compare because there aren't a lot of other schools like us. But all that being said, we can do more, and we have a lot of resources. And one way that we can do more is to think about some of our parents, domestic parents from New York, from Baltimore, from sort of anywhere that would love to come up, but financially might be a challenge when you think about the cost of a hotel room for a night or two. So that really was the impetus behind this, and will certainly be a big part of our push.
I wasn't here yesterday when they made all the big decisions, but I was here Monday when we were talking about it. And my big push was for mobility, put it on wheels, so you could move it around and have different places. If something was happening, you could move it out of the way. Or the problem running into that was, of course, plumbing, because they said, we thought at first we wouldn't have bathrooms, and I said, well, I'm not staying there because I won't make it through the night without a bathroom, right? So then they kind of settled on a composting toilet with a collection underneath that could be cleaned out once a year or so. But so we couldn't move it at that point because there was no connection to anything or electricity. So we'd also need heating and everything else in there. So you need making it mobile was kind of off the table at that point, if we wanted to use it 4 seasons. So that's my input.
I jumped in on this yesterday, mostly because I feel like I think we are limited to, if we have guests, to being able to say if I had an artist, a visiting artist on campus, or someone coming up to perform or something, like that would be a really lovely opportunity to say, hey, like all you need to do is come up and stay here, because you know, if I have to host a guest for a week, that's upwards to over $1,000 for a hotel or whatever that is, and that was a big thing at my last school. So, you know, having that space and everything. So that's kind of why I jumped on the project.
I'm going to give them a little tour of your
Sure.
overhead.
So this is done on a laser cutter. We have to mention our name here. Is that showing
Get it
up?
up there.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, let me refresh. There you go.
So we did start with the Fessenden family tiny homes, and then we then go ahead with Stetler cottages, maybe to get some push behind this, we'll see where this is going. Kind of a shameless ploy, I guess. There. So you can see the layout here is pretty basic. Just maybe a queen size bed, some side tables, a pull-out couch. This could be a shower over here or a closet, or the bathroom could expand a little bit. We have some nice trees. Thanks, Erica.
There is space next to the sink. It's hard to tell because of the angle, but this design does have a shower on that sort of top left corner of the VBOOT model that we looked at. Huh?
You didn't print the shower.
We didn't print the shower. So I think that's it. Anybody have questions?
I think one last thing. I think we also were being very friendly. Like this, we have solar panels. We do want to do a compost toilet. Like I think that's like whether or not we can tie that into the health and wellness part of our curriculum, and then also like as if I think we also talked about how if this could be a part of the 8th grade curriculum, whether or not they're actually designing it in the process, and then having kids also being a part of maintenance or just the continue that process through curriculum somehow would be, I think, the ideal here.